I'm going to let you in for a secret. For many years, I'm used to be called the Grinch in my family and small circle of friends during Christmas. I've always hated Christmas, and for the reasons such as expecting people to receive and to give gifts. Gifts. And of course, it's not only about gifts during Christmas, and then I only realized this later on when I got older. Christmas is more than just about gift giving and gift receiving. Christmas is more about sharing love, joy, and hope. And what better way to share these positive feelings or sensations that everyone should get to experience than, me talking about how to find joy in language learning. So, if you're new to the channel, I'm Angelique, and I'm a scientist by training turned storyteller. And what I want to do in this YouTube channel is to share with you some stories or some thoughts I have pertaining to science, technology, natural lifestyle, and language learning. Aside from this YouTube channel, of course, I am a co-host of this Italian language learning podcast called The Italian Escape together with my husband. And I want to share with you today what I learned from the latest episode that we just recorded and just published with Heidi Lovejoy. Now, in this short video, I would like to talk to you about the 5 key lessons I learned from Heidi during our conversation, where we get to talk about her life story and ways to find joy in language learning. So, how do we find joy in language learning? The first lesson that I would like to share with you is by being grateful. Now, how do we be grateful? I think we have to start from the beginning where we talk about privilege. Privilege can be defined in 2 ways according to the Cambridge Dictionary. Privilege could be thought of as an unfair advantage or an advantage that people have because they're rich or they have the power to do so. Or the second definition, which is opportunity. So seeking privilege as an opportunity which is enjoyable. Now, these 2 definitions can be noticeable when you listen to our latest episode with Heidi. She first shares her experience as a 12-year-old in Kentucky of privilege as an unfair advantage. Now, what does that mean? During that time, she told us that she was just feeling pretty normal speaking the English language, and then she began meeting non-native speakers who had to assimilate to the community by speaking English. Slowly but surely, she realized that these non-native speakers were not translating word per word from their native language or mother tongue to English, and that she didn't have to do this, so making it easier for her to communicate rather than the non-native speakers who had to keep on translating every time they do a conversation in English. And so she realized that people take it for granted in America or in the United States of using the English language as mother tongue. So the second definition of privilege as an opportunity occurred in the adult life of Heidi. In the beginning, she thought, oh, maybe I can only learn another language if my mom or my dad was a non-native speaker in America, which is not true. She was able to debunk this myth when she moved to Italy and then later on to Germany together with her family. Here she got to see from another perspective what it's like to learn a language that she's not familiar with in order to communicate with the local communities. And so she felt like language learning was a privilege. Rather than just knowing English, she took this opportunity to also learn other languages in order to just express herself and listen to other people's stories. So to sum it all up, what does this first lesson tell us? This first lesson tells us that rather than just feeling guilty about having the advantage of language learning, we could just feel grateful that we are taking the next step and learning someone else's language and seeing their and listening to their story from their perspective. Second lesson that we're going to talk about right now is learning to let go. Are you one of those people who are, enthusiastic of learning the language to the point you want to be so perfect? Well, Heidi also encountered the same dilemma. In her story, in our interview, Heidi talks about language learning not only as a form of joy, but also as a form of despair. So just think about the yin and the yang of language learning. It's not always about being so cool to, speak Mandarin Chinese fluently, but it's also about struggling to learn the language. And so, one of those thoughts that Heidi had, and I also encounter some days, is how do I conjugate this Italian verb, for example? Now, like Heidi, I got frustrated about the language learning process. But then she realized something, that she had to make things more effortless, that she was ruining the fun of language learning if she focused too much on the nuances or the little details of language learning. She learned to let go. So that means letting go of her perfectionism. And what could she do in exchange? She then focused on building connections, on building this rapport with people by talking to them in English and in German, and not be too, crazy about whether or not she made a little mistake in her sentence, as long as she felt understood and felt seen by the people who are engaging with her. In short, she let go of her control and let go of this expectation of being very fluent. I don't even know what fluency really means for many, but being perfect. And because of this, her conversations in the long run got deeper and more meaningful. Isn't that great? What does this lesson tell us? That by learning to let go, we try to seek other opportunities that make it more effortless for us to learn the language. And that could also mean building emotional and social connections with other people in your target language. So what will be the third lesson, you might ask? Well, it's kind of related to the second lesson. Now that we learn how to let go of our perfection, we should try also to trust the process. In this case, I will tell you more about Heidi not only as a language learner, but also as a parent. So, being both, Heidi wanted to instill this practice of language learning with her kids. And that meant trying to speak a bit more Italian at home when her younger daughter was already entering the local public schools in Italy. And in the beginning, she said, "Oh, ma ciao," like asking her daughter to engage with her in Italian at home, because that was one of the few ways she could try to practice it with her daughter. But at first, the daughter was like, "Nah, I will not try to learn or speak Italian at home. I need English. I need some groundedness. I need to feel a sense of home. So I don't want to be overwhelmed in the beginning learning Italian, which I'm already doing in school and outside the house, so might as well try to speak English at home." But then over time, of course, her daughter became more comfortable in speaking the Italian language. In fact, right now, Heidi and her daughter would share meaningful or deep conversations actually while in Germany by speaking Italian. In order to arrive at that goal, of course, Heidi didn't try to be the helicopter parent or the parent who tries to nose around the kids' every move. She was just trying to nudge her a bit, but also surrendering to the process and just wait for her daughter to be more comfortable with speaking in Italian. Of course, the same principle was applied when raising her son, who's only started entering the public school in Germany since he was too little while they were in Italy. Of course, at the beginning, his teachers were very worried that he could not speak because he was still just, not speaking in school while the rest of the class was speaking. But as you might not understand or comprehend, he was already trying to absorb 3 languages at home because Heidi was not only speaking English to the whole family, she was also trying to integrate some Italian and then also trying to integrate some German in the household. Her son took some time in order to connect the dots. And sooner or later, tada! her son was able to learn German and to speak German, though not fluently. He can be understood by his teachers. So as you can see from both the stories of her daughter and her son, she just allowed them to be who they are and just surrendered to the process, trusted the process, and saying, well, I guess they needed their time. So what is the main takeaway message of the third lesson? The third lesson tells us that every journey is different for every person, so might as well try to be more compassionate with yourself and just trust the process that you will eventually get there and become the language learner that you want to be in the future. Now, for the fourth lesson, this could come as a surprise for some of you, or maybe many of you. The fourth lesson I actually learned from Heidi was to be sober. Wait, I'm not telling you to stop drinking, though it could have its benefits. What I'm telling you is that by being sober, you then encounter the voices in your head, so the chatter. And this chatter would tell you, or would show you, the many issues that you have that could hamper your language learning journey. This was the case for Heidi when she was struggling to make or to seek joy in language learning while in Italy. So this was the time when there was COVID already starting and there was the first lockdown in Italy. May I remind you that the lockdown in Italy was very heavy for everyone, including Heidi. So of course, there had been an instance of epiphany for Heidi to reevaluate her language learning goals. And so she realized, hey, maybe I should try being sober, because you cannot just drink your life away each day just hoping that the COVID will go away. So by stopping her consumption on alcohol, she realized that the voices in her head that were trying to make it hard for her to learn the language was her perfectionism. And as you can remember in our second and third lessons from Heidi's conversation, she realized that she had to find joy in other ways rather than just following the routine that everyone would say on mastering the language. And so, what's the point of it all? While being sober, you will have more clarity. You will be able to detect the sounds or the noise in your mind. And from there, once you begin to be more mindful, instead of running away from them, you confront them. And by confronting them, you can then be able to reevaluate your reality and your expectations and see how you can proceed from now onwards on how to make your language learning journey more joyous. So the fifth lesson, which is the last one that I'm going to share with you today, that I took from Heidi, was by staying curious. So we need to stay curious. Why? Well, there was this part of the conversation where she talked about those instances that kids are sitting too much in their chairs and trying to learn a language. That actually happened to me when I was growing up, and it was difficult because you had no or little motivation to learn the language that you don't even use in your actual life, so with friends or with family, and yet you're forced to learn the language. And so just like kids, adults should try to find ways to make language learning more fun. That could mean listening to some stuff you're interested in, listening to music, watching some movies, and so on, trying to put games or integrate games in your language learning process. There's so many possibilities to make language learning fun. And by making it fun, you're able to retain more and make it less grueling for your language learning process. And just like Frodo, you need to do things your way. You cannot just follow other people's template. In short, you need to be the protagonist of your language learning journey. And once you have fun, or you integrate fun in your language learning experience, you will also encounter another advantage, the Super Mario effect, where you just accelerate your language learning experience and rapidly remember more stuff in the long run. So what's the takeaway message of this last lesson? By introducing play into your life, you can make your language learning experience more fun. So as you can see, all these 5 lessons tell you how the mind works. That you can find ways to trick it and not rely too much on grit, because it will lead you to nowhere if you just suck it up. So rather than go on and accept eternal suffering and maybe in the consequence affect your private life or personal life, we should rather apply these 5 lessons and find ways to make language learning more effortless rather than effortful. So I hope at the end of this video, you can apply these 5 lessons that I learned from Heidi and make your language learning experience more joyous for next year. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year!